Are our streets safe? In tonight's Law and Disorder, we're looking at why there's a disconnect between the way Americans feel and what our crime data shows. And for once, the news is actually positive. These numbers show the amount of homicides this year compared to the same period last year. In major cities nationwide, the numbers of murders are plummeting. Boston has seen the biggest drop, down nearly 82%. That's an astounding number, 82%. But it's not all good news. Los Angeles and Atlanta's numbers are actually increasing. We saw a huge spike in homicides during the pandemic, but FBI data shows that overall, crime has steadily decreased since 2022. Despite that, people still feel pretty uneasy. According to the recent Gallup polls, more Americans see crime as a serious problem. 63% think it's extremely or very serious, and the majority of people think it's getting worse. Not only that, people feel the most unsafe in 3 decades. People worry about walking home alone at night, being victimized, and these fears about crime are actually deterring most Americans from going about their daily lives. Our Chicago reporter Jeremy Ross has a closer look at this issue.
No, it's not safer. No.
Whether riding on the train, in a car, or walking on the sidewalk like this, some Americans don't feel safe, particularly in large cities like this one. And we saw firsthand one reason why.
This is what I'm talking about. This is right here.
While on Chicago's Red Line, a woman we were talking to was visibly concerned by some passing through our conversation.
Real sad and embarrassing.
Chicago might be famous for its art and architecture, but it is infamous for recent safety concerns. A Gallup poll last summer shows 70% of Americans consider the city unsafe, only Detroit seen as less safe. And it's not just big cities. That same poll showing 40% of Americans afraid to walk at night by themselves within about a mile of their own home. 10-4. Crime concerns impact in different ways. 31% of people in that same poll say they avoid nearby cities. And that same number, 31%, say they won't take walks, jog, or run alone. But when U.S. News and World Report looked at crime per capita, meaning reported crime relative to the number of people living in the cities where it happened, Chicago didn't even crack the top 25. Ultimately, what matters here is you. How you feel. Do you feel safe?
Joining us now is John Schell, the New York Police Department Chief of Patrol. Chief, thanks so much for joining us tonight. New York is showing a 15% drop in homicides. Why do you think people still feel unsafe?
Well, here in New York, and I guess around the country, we could talk numbers all day, but people want to feel safe. And what exacerbates them and what they don't feel good about is a lot of events, social media plays a big part of this. Some of our news media locally in New York City, our print media, sometimes doesn't tell the full story. And we suffer from recidivism, or what we call repeat offenders. When people see, when a New Yorker sees people constantly getting out of jail who are hurting people, who are robbing people and stealing property, and they see their record, you compound that with social media, you compound that with maybe not telling the full story, it gives people just a feeling of, I don't feel safe. And that's what we battle here. It's reality versus perception in New York City.
Are there any types of crimes in New York that are on the rise?
Well, right now, we're down about 2.5% in crime. Our violence is way down. I mean, the last 2 years, we have about 785 less shooting victims. Our homicides are down. Our gun arrests are through the roof. Right now, we have a slight tick up in robberies, and assaults. Unfortunately, those assaults are assaults against our police officers. So again, consequences matter. We need more consequences. Crime is coming down, but what does it tell you when our enforcement in New York City is through the roof, 25, 30-year highs? And crime is coming down, but not coming down fast enough. And that's repeat offenders, and we need more consequences.
You talk about the difference between perception and reality, and the reality is actually very positive. How do you battle with that perception? And do you see the members of your community reacting in a negative way based on that perception that they continue to have?
Well, there's two types of communities here in New York City, and I eventually say throughout the country. You got the people, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, have been here 40 years. That's our community. But sometimes we listen to the fringes who make the most noise. That are our community. How do we make them safe? What we've been doing here in New York City on social media is we're controlling our own story. We're not relying on people to tell our story. We'll tell our own story. And we'll amplify the hard work by the police department. We'll show the numbers, and we'll do everything we can to keep New Yorkers safe and feeling safe.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Chief, for being here tonight.